Warning, this content may be offensive, upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Ex-prisoners of Reddit. Who was the most evil person there, and what did they do that was so bad? Was in prison for 27 months. Unfortunately, your child molesters and CP guys were mixed into the general population, so you would get all kinds like that everywhere. The worst one I heard of was when I was in military prison. Details are foggy, because this was 13 years ago, but I remember there being a guy who got 99 years for murder. He had killed a guy, then killed the guy's wife, because she was home, and would have been a witness, but not before violating her first. The whole facility got locked down every time they moved this guy, because they didn't even want the other inmates to see what he looked like. The other one was at the same facility. So in the army, there's a thing called turtle ducking, where you hit someone's Kevlar helmet with your Kevlar helmet. It makes a loud thunk sound, but doesn't really hurt. People didn't hit super hard, just hard enough to make the noise happen. This guy turtle ducked a girl when she wasn't wearing a Kevlar helmet. She ended up dying while the guy was still awaiting his trial, and he went full on cuckoo bananas. I was in a women's prison. The new inmate told everyone she was in for tax fraud. A couple of days later, she gets the crap beaten out of her and doesn't leave her cell again. Food gets taken in by screws, and eventually, she gets ghosted out. Turns out she was in our side and both her husband and son were in the male side for running a child porn ring. Those guys had been put straight in the vulnerable prisoners wing, but most female prisons don't have enough sex offenders to have one. It was one of the screws who told some of the inmates why she was in. They wanted her to be taught a lesson. The offenses were awful. She was fully part of it and was responsible for acquiring a lot of the victims as she was trusted by people. The youngest victim was her niece's 3-month-old who had to be hospitalized due to trauma. I had a cellie in prison who was a KKK white boy. He was a madman. He was always pissed off and would say the craziest stuff like, "Did you hear that? The white rhino is going extinct. Freaking Jews." I was watching the movie about black pilots in World War II, and he sat down indignant and rolled his eyes and guffawed. "Black pilots? Common." I said, "You really think there are no black pilots?" He said, "Hell no. Have you ever seen a black pilot?" It was like this every day until my move finally got approved. English guy here. I spent 4.5 months in prison in 2018. There was a guy who was really nice, seemed like a genuine guy. That was until I found out her strangled his drunk wife to death and left her there whilst he went to work the next morning. I'm 20 years old male and was in and out juvenile from 15 to 18 till I went to the county jail. The worst people I came into contact was a boy 15 who shot his stepmother. He slit her throat, beat her head in with a blunt object, wrapped her in sheets for the father's roommate to find her, then he shot him. Happened in McMinnville, Oregon. Other than that, a lot of people were in for violating siblings or making threats to shoot up the high schools in the area. That's Yamhill County for you. This rich kid stabbed his friend in the chest, killing him, but he was on Xanax and weed at the time and doesn't remember anything of it other than his friend on the floor dying. The mad thing is that this guy, 18 years old, actually got off with the murder and found not guilty, although was sent down for just under 2 years for possession of a knife. His parents were quite wealthy and it was a big case in the UK. Basically, his barristers were the best money could buy, and he said that's how he got off. He didn't have any remorse for his actions, which was made him a pretty messed up person. It's a funny one though, because he actually seemed a nice guy until he would talk about the killing and just didn't care what he had done. Nobody else in the prison had ever killed anyone to my knowledge, as it was a lower cat prison, but he was only there for possession of a knife. When I was in the outbarks the day before I was released, I was hanging out with a bunch of guys just killing time. One of them was part of a multi-killing gang. They kidnapped and killed a bunch of people for body parts and cut them off while the people were alive. It was a pretty gruesome case. Anyways, he was really quiet and rather stupid. Just a simple farm boy type. When I was in jail, my cellie was a guy that tied his old lady down to their table and tried to carve "Do not resuscitate" into her chest. Halfway through the cops showed up because the neighbors could hear her screaming. I tried as politely as I could to tell the captain that I don't mess around with woman beaters and asked for a block transfer. Thankfully they put me in work release, which was awesome because I got to work in the kitchen and deliver food to the different blocks. No food hall meals were brought to you and you never left your block except to go to the basketball court or the library. Well, one day I'm serving food to one of the solitary cells and as soon as the slot is opened a drenching wet magazine gets thrown out. Turns out it's covered in piss and the woman inside is a chick my previous cellie carved up. Turns out she stabbed her son with a syringe of her blood and she was inside too. Some crazy stories all around, but that couple far and away were the craziest people I saw. There was a correctional officer at least 6'5" and well built and he would always come in pissed off. So one morning we are waiting in line for breakfast and he thought he heard this older man call him a witch. He followed the man back to his cell and started teeing off on him. The man didn't even try fighting back and when he fell the first time he split his head open on the steel bunk. The inmate was so out of it, he started asking where his car keys and wallet went while he was on the ground bleeding. The CO hears the man and for some reason turns around and goes back and hits him a few more times and says, "Who's the witch now?" The words "I shot that witch in the stomach and I hope they both die" were used in reference to a 15-year-old pregnant girl. I won't ever be able to forget that one. The guy was in his mid-20s maybe. No idea what his relation to her was. Not really the kind of thing you ask about in that situation. I went to county jail. It was an eye-opening experience. The inmates were generally pretty decent. Most were just there because of a moment of stupidity. Others were there because they suffered from mental health issues. The evil people were the correctional officers. Their behavior was horrific and disgusting. Jail is designed to strip your humanity and CO are the enforcers of this paradigm. Hands down. So this lady was married, husband cheated, had a full-blown affair, ended up with a love child. Somewhere along the line, the wife is babysitting the husband's illegitimate child. He comes home from work, sitting down to eat dinner, and asks her how is the baby? She says, "I don't know, you tell me." This witch ended up killing the baby, cooking it, putting it in the food, and fed it to him. She's doing 2 life sentences. This is in Arizona by the way. She looks like the devil. Her eyes are literally black, and she looks like she has no soul. It takes a lot to creep me out, but this lady's vibe is definitely one of the darkest things I have ever felt in my entire life. I've never been to prison/jail, but I got my ex locked up for a bit for assaulting me, and because he was from out of state, had to sit his happy ass in the county for 90 days due to being a flight risk. For context, he shoved me so hard, I flipped over the back of a couch into a table, shoved me into a door bruising my back on the doorknob, then slammed my face up against a mirror so hard it gave me a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. He told me later, because of course I talked to him again. Right, what a catch, that he thought he was in there for nothing. There were dudes on the same floor and therefore beating their girls bloody with pipes and already talking about how bad they were gonna beat them when they got out. How I should consider myself lucky cause those girls are gonna die when those guys get out. PS don't worry y'all, I'm alive, married to an actual saint, and living my best life, and haven't heard from this dude in almost 9 years. There is this dude in his 40s, this was when I was at the county jail, before being shipped off to state prison, who was a janitor at an elementary school. He was weird with a giant Star of David tattoo on his back, and blonde highlights in his longish bowl-cut black hair. He sodomized 2 girls, 9 and 11 with a broom handle. I think his charge was sodomy with a foreign object. I remember everyone feeling contempt, because we knew that in that county, sex offenders got off easy. Fortunately, we were wrong. He was given life. I remember the paper he got from court read, release date, deceased. There was another child molester who violated his 3-year-old daughter, and when his wife caught him, she freaked out and called the police. He ran from the cops in a car and drove off a cliffside. Whether that was on purpose or not I'm not sure, but here is where it gets worse. So after the accident, he couldn't talk or act normal. He was essentially retarded, would shuffle around, and rock back and forth anytime someone talked to him. Brain damage is what people said, from the car crash. People were nice to him, until they found out his charge, then ignored him, or were cold towards him, but he was restarted at this point, so no one went out of their way to harm him. This went on for maybe 7 or 8 months, but people started to say he was full of crap, because gradually he started acting more normal, or people would catch him acting more normal than they believe he tried to portray himself. Eventually, it became obvious. He could not keep up the charade any longer and everyone knew he was faking being retarded. People started messing with him and tormenting him, people pissing on his laundry bag, trustees banging their brooms on the side of his cell wall to make him start going crazy and crying. He had a single cell in the corner. He was still trying to act like he was restarted, but was slipping up and slacking at times, and it became obvious he was full of crap. The worst part is that he only got 4 years for violating his daughter. I got 6 years for robbing someone of their drugs. Anyways, when he got to state prison, after being shipped from the county jail, he got beat real bad. Word travels in the system. I think he spent the remainder of his time in isolation. Even the guards hated him and knew he was pretending. My friend's dad was a volunteer chaplain, taking care of prisoners' religious needs at the county jail. He came into our criminal justice class to talk about working at a jail. He told us that the most evil people at a jail are the ones that show no remorse for their actions. He saw the guy that killed a foreign exchange student that attended the University of Utah, and he told us that the guy didn't seem to care at all. He was calm about everything. Not in prison, but I was an intern in a public defender's office over 10 years ago, and the one that stands out was a juvenile locked up for the 3rd time for violating kids aged 2 to 4. The kid was obese and clearly very damaged. This was a juvenile detention center that was often used as a babysitter by crackhead moms, accuse the kid of a crime, and get them locked up for the weekend so they could go on a bender. He was serving a sentence. I was warned going in there that he could turn violent at the drop of a hat, and the attorney was nervous about bringing a young female in, but I insisted. The kid looks me straight in the eye and says, "Don't let me out. I will do it again." I can't stop. He was hunched over, dead eyes and completely serious. I was in jail, not prison, several times, and most of the inmates were cool. Not saying they didn't deserve to be in jail, but there was genuine camaraderie. The correctional officers and the guards were the evil ones. They would deny us things like soap to wash with, make us ask 3 times when we were out of toilet paper, that kind of thing. I talked to one of the CO about it, and he said they're insecure. He said that as a CO you have to have a certain level of confidence and inner belief in order to tell another grown man what to do. Some of the CO didn't have this, and the way it came out was bullying. So yeah, the real evil is in the jailers, not the captives. Was in Spofford Juvenile Detention Center when I was 13, not a good age to be there at 4 feet 9, 100 pounds, and I was one of 2 Caucasians in the entire place, so I mostly kept to myself. I did befriend a kid named Chris Whitehead who showed up with a freshly healed scar about 15 to 20 inches long in the shape of a C on the side of his head. He didn't talk much, but he ended up telling me how it happened. When I finally got the nerve to ask him, told me his older brother jumped him into the crypts, and since he cried during, he took a hot knife and burned it into his head for the disrespect. Then he had his little brother, the same age as me by the way, shoot the first person to cross the street in their neighborhood, who ended up being a young pregnant girl. How he only ended up at Spofford is beyond me, but it was disgusting to see such a nice kid end up there because of his older piece of crap brother. I remember when he went to court he was sure he'd be transferred, so he pissed all over his jumpsuit and stuffed it in the radiator, causing all of us in the semi-violent block to be moved upstairs with the actual violent criminals. The staff members there gave everyone their permission to beat the living crap out of him when he came back, but he never did because he got transferred, thankfully, because his brother ended up there too and was fully on board with the beatdown his brother was going to receive. Really glad they shut down that place because they were running drugs and a prostitution ring on the female side, and the treatment of the kids there was disgusting, to say the least. I wasn't in prison, but my mom spent 15 years in one. She was at a women's only prison, since it was either that or she got sent to a different state. Where I live we only have 2 prisons that are in practice. My mom told me stories though, so there were a lot of women who killed their babies and stuff, or went crazy and killed their partners. My mom was the beige suits with the public of the prison and not with the people in the administrative segregation. She told me about some crazy people she talked to though. Most were chill, in on some drug felony like my mom, but then there was this one lady who wouldn't talk to anyone and baked and ate her 8-month-old. Pretty sick. I wasn't an inmate, I was an officer, so my opinion might be disqualified. But at a facility I worked at we were a level 5, which is maximum security. Lots of people who had a life without parole and just a bunch of different things happened. One guy was on a documentary because he traveled across several states and killed around 5 people in total. He was pissed cause the documentary blamed him, but he always tried to say his father hitting him as a child made him kill these people. Then there's the old guy who violated his young grandchildren and was furious that he was sent to prison cause they were his grandkids, so he could do whatever he wanted. He had also violated his children when they were growing up. Lots of sick things in a maximum security prison, and those would be nothing when compared to a federal supermax. A woman I was acquainted with in the facility I was in allegedly microwaved her child. Another woman killed her parents. A good friend of mine was forced by her husband to dispose of her sister's body after her husband had violated and murdered her. You don't ask why are you here. They'll tell you if they want you to know. I was incarcerated with over 280 people doing life without parole. There were all kinds: stabbed the neighbor lady 150 plus times, shot a bully in the head in the school parking lot, beat a dude with a hammer, etc. There were 2 that stuck with me though. One way he looked me right in the eye and told me about shooting a guy with a shotgun to the chest. And a weirdo that kidnapped and killed some girl in his basement was another. John Wayne Gacy actually designed the miniature golf course there. I did 5 years in Leicester and Featherstone in the early 80s. One guy in Featherstone was a lifer and had done 30 plus years. Apparently, he used to violate young boys and cut their genitals off. When he was arrested, he had a fresh male genital in his pocket. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, hit like, get subscribed, and tell us which story gave you the chills in the comment section. And support the original writers with upvotes. Links in the description box.